Get started with basically the material that I had intended to do. Last night's, the one that I did last night tonight, and the one that I doing tonight last night. So if anyone missed their stream from last night, we can take a look at that. We were interested in looking. I was interested in starting off at least with some theory. We have Caro Kann with an early c4. I thought this was a pretty interesting line. This is also a bit narrow, but I know that a lot of people play it. A lot of people like to play it, so I wanted to be sure that that we covered it. E4, C6, C4. Just in terms of like likelihood of this happening, it happens about a tenth as frequently as D4 does. But here, you basically have two pieces threatening the D5 pawn. If d5 is played, you can take it twice, and white ends up with an isolated queen pawn. That's usually what happens here. Pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, and then either queen takes, in which case you have knight c3, but the isolated queen pawn, or potentially you could play d4 here as well. In terms of other moves, basically pawn takes, this ends up being some type of, I guess they call this the Panov attack, but it's basically pretty interesting too. If you have d4, the c4 pawn is threatening d5. This plays in some ways like a queen's pawn opening, in some ways not like a queen's pawn opening. But in general, it's a pretty interesting situation, and should offer both sides relatively good chances. The main issue with this line is that it rarely gives much of a lead for white. It's kind of interesting. It looks like they want you to play c takes d5 first. So I'm a little bit confused about what the differentiation between these lines is, because it seems like they trade off about the same. So here, c takes d5 leads to a plus 0.36. and e takes d5 leads to a plus 0.17. So pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, then like knight f6 or something, but basically, white has roughly the same ideas no matter what. Hey, welcome, Stop Clock. Since I messed up the schedule last night, if you send the link, we can go over it during this stream. This is unusual, just since I messed up the, hey, welcome, FIFA Boy. But since I messed up the, cool. All right, we'll go over this one at the, during the stream, for sure, Stop Clock. Thank you for sending it. Yeah, please, everybody just keep sending games. It's super helpful for me to know what to work with. And yeah, thank you very much for sending it. I'm scheduling about 2 days in advance. So, you're getting, I have, basically tomorrow all done so far. And basically in through the end of day on the 11th. I have a few more spaces for the end of the day on the 11th. If anyone wants to send anything, yeah, no, I'm hoping for some good progress. I just want to keep everyone interested and try my best to do something helpful. It really appreciate you guys being here, and it is nice. I get a little bit spoiled since we've had a couple of good weeks. Feeling good about things, but yeah, no, really just trying to do something helpful, and I appreciate you guys being here, and I hope I can be a helpful resource. So yeah, basically, yeah, I'm getting about a game or a day or two in advance. You know what? If you want to send one to Porgs, we can take a look at it tonight as well. I'm fine. I'll go over tonight. I'm in a good mood, so I'll if you guys want to send if you want to send one over to Porgs, we can take a look. Awesome. Yeah, no, I'll put this in for tonight. This is basically just because I messed up last night. It was kind of a bummer. I basically did last night's games tonight, and then I did an extra one this morning to catch up. So, I'm not so awesome with some of the clerical stuff yet, but this appears to be working, and I'm just happy to be helpful. Awesome, thanks. So yeah, so I'll do Stop Clocks tonight, and I'll do Porgs tonight as well. So just want to make sure I've got it. Cool. And also I got I saw that Priom subscribed. That was very nice. I really appreciate you subscribing and supporting the channel. I think I'm gonna probably donate the money. I mean, I'm gonna donate the money from the channel, but I don't know exactly where to donate it yet. I'm thinking maybe, I don't know. I guess I would be in favor of other people doing this general model, but anyways, I really appreciate you subscribing, and it's nice to know that you support the chat. Hey, welcome, Bohemian. How are you? But yeah, no, we'll get stop clock and Porgs' game in tonight for sure. No, just really honestly with this, just trying to be helpful, trying to make, you know, I figured this will be a helpful resource to people who need it, so that's the goal really. Yeah. Anyways, we're taking a look at this c4 line in the Caro-Kann. So d5, pawn takes, c takes, queen takes, knight c3. And basically here, you know, what do you, you know, there's a few different options: queen a5, queen d6, queen d8. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Tiger. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, pseudo Panov. So the real Panov is with the d4 line, right? Here, you know, you have basically the direct Panov attack, but it is sort of similar. You know, with pawn takes d5 and knight c3, that's some version of the Panov. I think they call it the accelerated Panov, but it's the basic same concept. So, you know, options for black. I don't know. This looks good. I like the position that the white gets here, but this, I'm surprised to see this isn't the preferred line. The most common one is the Panov. Hey, thanks everybody. Hey Aphelion, how's it going? Thanks all for being here. But yeah, so c4 and you know, I'm kind of curious. I'm also kind of curious about looking at this other option. This is kind of strange too. You know, basically Caro-Kann with e5 being played. I don't even know what you would characterize this opening as. Maybe knight f3, d6, d4, and it ends up being some type of like I don't know. I mean, like kings in, I guess, modern. This is some type of transposition of the modern. But overall, you know, white's hoping for, you know, basically e5 is not objectively very good for black. With the e5 move, basically white's got a plus 0.75. And with the d5 move, white's pretty close to equality. Maybe a little better, but pretty close to equality. So c takes, pawn takes, and then e takes is by far better than e5 or d4. And it's really up to black whether he wants to play knight takes, or knight to f6, or queen to d5. On queen to d5, white gets a free development. Knight to f6 is a more common response. Now you can play knight takes d5, and on knight takes d5, knight takes d5, queen takes d5, and everything's good for white. Knight f3 here, knight c6, d4, bishop g4, queen b3. Basically here I would say that white's in a pretty good position. You know, I guess I would say that I would give white a positive eval. A lot of these games will involve trying to figure out how to, you know, basically how to play good moves against, you know, good moves with the isolated queen's pawn. It's pretty unusual for this opening to not transpose into an isolated queen's pawn opening. So pawn takes d5, pawn takes d5, pawn takes, queen takes, knight c3, and this pawn is isolated on d2, and that makes things a little bit tricky. Here, knight f3, you know, standard developing moves, so the queen's probably going to play to, I guess I would say d8 is probably the most likely, but standard developing moves for white will help, you know, white play comfortably with this isolated queen pawn. You know, waiting for bishop c4 and knight f3 for d4 to be played. But here, you know, it's basically it's basically similar transpositions to a lot of different ideas. But basically here, I think white's got a better position, and you know, queen e2 is a potential move, rook e1's a potential move, and overall, white has about 0.7 advantage. This looks pretty good. Comfortable development for white. Really just a fairly equal game. You know, this pawn faces off favorably against this pawn, but on the other hand, it's isolated. So, you know, this d4 pawn has better center control than the e6 pawn, but it doesn't have the same but it doesn't have the same kind of development or cohesiveness with the overall pawn structure. So basically, white has better center control, but black has a better pawn structure with 4 and 2, as opposed to 3 islands. Anyways, bishop f4, a3, straightforward developing moves will work for white. And really, just as a general concept, this is a way to play for, this is an interesting way to play for an advantage for white. It can take a very booked up, Caro Kann opening player out of the book. If you know your opponent plays Caro Kann well and is well prepared, this is an opportunity to get a relatively equal position. You'll probably have to deal with a slightly weaker pawn structure throughout the game. We will get some benefits from rook to c1 potentially. Rook to c1 paired with knight b5 can be good. And overall, I like white's general idea here. Bishop c4, healthy development. I think you can probably get the d4 pawn off the board for the e6 pawn by playing d5 at some point too, if you're really worried about the pawn structure. That may not be worth it. You've got better center control, so you may not want to trade or play d5. But overall, it looks like a pretty good position. Rook to c1 is an idea for white. Rook to e1 is an idea for white. Bishop to f4 is an idea for white. Really, just a fairly calm game. In terms of longer-term strategy, black's probably going to try to attack this pawn on d4. You don't really have to spend too much in terms of defending it. I think you play queen d2, rook d1. That's pretty much fine. And then you can push aggressively against on the king side if you'd like. I think that's a plan. It's an interesting position. Coming up with a plan's not so easy. I lean towards attacking on the king side, but maybe bishop e3 and a queenside attack would be good here too. You can refer to ideas in the Belanoff. The Belanoff has multiple different attacking general strategies. That's probably the best way to assess this. I think the Belanoff opening strategies are very flexible, and they will apply to similar positions to the Belanoff, like this one. And overall, I just think healthy development for white, an open game, and basically something very different than what a Caro Kann player might be expecting. So I think overall it provides a pretty good way for white to play something that the opponent's not necessarily prepared for, and still obtain what is objectively a fairly good position. I think basically this this is not bad. This general trade, either with knight f6 or queen takes d5, still gives white an initiative. I mean, usually when you want practical compensation and to take your opponent out of the book, you have to give up something. You usually have to accept equality for white against best play, or basically be subject to more risks than you normally would be. I think knight c3, bishop c4, those kinds of moves, queen b3, those are all types of things that I think would work. d4 might also be a good idea. But I think white's fine. In this situation, you've done something unusual. You've given your opponent something that they're not prepared for, and basically you can continue on forward with a normal game. You will have to know how to play an isolated queen's pawn fairly well. But white still has the initiative. White has better development, and it's an open game against a Caro Kann player who may or may not be comfortable playing open games. So I don't know. I like the idea. Very interesting stuff. Hey, Kiro, how's it going? How are you? But also, queen takes d5 is not forced here. Knight f6 can be played instead. On here, the most common line on knight f6, the most common line is knight c3, followed by knight takes d5, and then knight f3. Regular development. You probably don't want to play something like queen b3. Probably don't want to play something like queen f3. I think the idea is just basically continue to develop in a straightforward way and accept the isolated queen's pawn for yes, that was my fault. We're doing May 8th stream today. If you were on the May 9th stream, please watch the stream from last night. I apologize. I flipped the pages, which is ridiculous. But I managed to. I think going forward that's not going to be a problem. Now I have a better system for it. But yeah, sorry. If you were supposed to have a game tonight, May 9th, then feel free to do to check out last night's stream. And if you were supposed to have a stream last night, then we're doing it tonight. So sorry for my fault on that one. That was pretty ridiculous on my part. But anyways, we're doing that, and if anyone is here that wants to send in an extra game, I think I'm gonna go a little extra just to make up, just to basically make up for my error. If anyone wants to send a game in right now, we can add a game or two to the roster. My fault on that. Yeah, I apologize. But yeah, feel free. Just feel free to send in another game or two. I'm in a good mood, and feel free if anyone's interested. If not, we have a full roster already. So either way, Kira's going first. Kira's got the first game, but basically, you know, I think that particular that night to yeah, sure, send it in, Kira. We'll take a look at it at the end of the stream. Okay, cool. Write it down, Aphelion. I'm very curious about it, or you could send it. If you send it, I'll if you just post the link, I'll add it to the list for tonight. I'm in a good mood, so we'll probably go 2 or 3 games extra. But yeah, just to reiterate, if your game was supposed to be May 9th, check the stream from last night because I flipped them. Oh yeah, yes. There is a Discord that we usually use for games, but I'm just thinking, just because we're all here, if you send one on the chat, on the Twitch chat, I'll just post it immediately in the thing. Okay. Anyways, whatever. If more, okay, race for the prize added for the end of the stream. Yeah, no problem at all, Race. Thank you very much for sending it, and we'll yeah, we're gonna get to this before the end of the stream for sure. If anyone else wants to send one too, you're welcome to. I feel like a dope for flipping the knights, so I wanted to make sure. Okay, so Kira's playing a WFM, a very highly rated opponent, 2303. Cool. And let's take a look. So basically, you know, this is a Queen's Gambit declined Orthodox. Sure, yeah, we can do that too at the end. But Queen's Gambit declined Orthodox with d5 and e6, and basically with Bishop f4, you've got some characteristics of a London type situation. But going up against Knight f6, you know, you have like Knight f3, e3. And basically, you know, just generally like a solid position for white. The Orthodox, Queen's Gambit Orthodox just generally doesn't challenge black that much. Black can play challenge white that much. Like I think Queen's Gambit Orthodox, you know, the most challenging idea is probably c5. It's tricky though. So in terms of moving this game forward, Bishop e7 is an unusual move. Bishop e7 is the third option, and I don't really know. Kira's playing white here. Bishop e7 is not a line I'm super familiar with, but it is the third most popular line in the Queen's Gambit Orthodox. I didn't realize it was so popular, but Bishop e7 here. Knight f3 is the main move. Bishop f4 I'm sure is also completely fine. Knight f6, straightforward development for both sides. Knight f3, castles, e3, c5, and this c5 is basically the way that black exerts pressure in this Queen's Gambit Orthodox. You played e6 to you know, hold the d5 square down, so you can play c5 pretty comfortably. Yeah, I don't know what it's called exactly. Harwitz attack. Yeah, but yeah, it is Bishop e7 is not a line that I know nearly as well as some of the Orthodox lines, but very interesting. So d takes c5 is the most popular move. With d takes c5, you get an isolated queen's pawn for black. Isolated queen's pawns, I guess, are a pretty common thing in queen's pawn openings. I think particularly in the Orthodox. But here, like d takes c5, bishop takes c5, and then white can potentially play c takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, ex d5. And then, black's got a position where he's got or actually she's got, because we know that this is a WFM, where she's got basically an isolated queen pawn that white's going to be able to exert pressure on. So basically, what do you do here as white? I think there's plans that involve attacking the d5 pawn aggressively. Bishop d3 might be an interesting move. You can play a fork queen c2, forking the h7 and the c5. But yeah, it's an interesting position, and I don't know exactly how white's supposed to capitalize on this. Maybe e3, castles, pawn takes, bishop d3. White's in a pretty good place generally. It's basically like, I don't know exactly what opening you would call this. I mean, maybe exchange. It's semi-Slav exchange variation, where you've basically traded off the e pawn and now you have this pawn structure. But overall, I think white's fine. No real challenges for white. c6 is a relatively passive defensive move. White's got a pretty clear initiative here. So bishop e7 in general, I think, is interesting. Not a line that I know super well, but bishop moving basically to a square where it's not directly attacking anything. It reinforces the knight, I guess. But overall, I think this just isn't a very ambitious line for black. Maybe someone who knows the line better than I do could... yeah, I mean, it's not a line that I know super well. It seems passive. Developing, but passive. Black will castle soon, and white will probably start an attack on the king side. In terms of plans, I think white's pretty quickly oriented towards attacking on the king side. Maybe h4, knight f3, h4, knight g5 could be good for white. Maybe castling queenside, and then it's a little bit more involved, but maybe castling queenside and then moving the rooks to the g and h files. I think it depends on how quickly white can manage to create an attack on the king side here. But knight f3, bishop g4, h3, and here, basically white, I think, has the initiative. I don't think that white needs to play bishop e2 here. Instead, I guess, the engine is suggesting rook to b1, rook to c1, g4. But bishop e2, takes away this is a purposeful diagonal for the bishop. So if you take that away from the bishop, you're sort of undeveloping it. I guess this is technically solid, but I like the bishop better on the d3 file. I sort of like ideas like, I don't know if you can get away with it, king h1, rook g1, queen to c2, something like that. But overall, I think this is solid and slightly better for white. But I like the bishop on the longer diagonal. Here, knight e5 simplifies things. I'm not sure it's super helpful. Trading this knight for this knight doesn't seem to really be that advantageous for white. In terms of, ideas, I guess I would probably play queen to, I don't know. I was thinking d3. The engine's suggesting b3. b3 doesn't seem thematically correct. Cool. Yeah, no, that should, I think that should work, Aphelion. Oh, we'll get to it for sure. Also, oh wait, this is the Aphelion line. Yes, okay, we're gonna play this every time Aphelion sends in a Traxler game, and it will be called the Aphelion line, and we'll play over it. Every time there's a Traxler game played, this line will be played obligatorily. Yeah, so here rook to c1 is a way to improve the pieces, but I think thematically the attack should be coming on the king side here, and g4, knight e5 maybe. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and trading, there's often practical considerations here. Like, that makes complete sense. If you want to trade into a simpler endgame and lessen, the chances of making a tactical slip, that totally makes sense to me, Kiro. Like, in a blitz game, there's not a bad idea to that. Or that's not a bad idea. Knight e5 discovers on e2, knight f8, And here, basically, I think white has better center control. This position is just going well for white, to be honest. F4 maybe. And yeah, I think you basically trade into a slightly favorable. Basically you see that you're winning, right? I mean, you're up a pawn. After knight takes d5, and then you very quickly trade off all the rest of the pieces. This makes sense, I think. I think that's a fair way to play this. If you're up a pawn, you can trade off all the major pieces. If you're equal but positionally better, I would be more reluctant to do that. But here, I think you basically, if you can trade off the minor pieces, you probably should. F5, okay. And yeah, perfect, awesome. You should win this now. I think that was completely the right way to play it. You traded off all the minor pieces, and cool. Well, it's the Aphelion line now, Aphelion. So every time it's relevant, we will go over the Aphelion line. Every Traxler game that comes in, we'll go over that line, and it will be known as the Aphelion line, at the very least in the stream going forward. Here, but yeah, I think your general strategy is a good one, which is basically trade off all the minor pieces here. This seems like a smart idea. I don't know, maybe king f4 or king e4 is a slightly better way to play this. King e4 maybe. Yeah, this seems not correct. King e2 seems like a pretty big blunder. So I think that one's sort of just an error, right? I mean, yeah, no, for sure, that makes sense. I can understand that. But yeah, this got away. So that's a bummer. That's sort of a bummer, Kiro. Those errors happen to me. They happen to me way too much. I'm just sort of commiserating. Like, those things happen all the time, especially in Blitz or Bullet. Like, it's just like, oh man. But yeah, I don't know what to say about that except basically do more tactical study. Tactical study will probably help you clean out some of those, some of those reflex responses. I think probably that's a good idea. It makes you more careful and less likely to play or pre-move something like that. But yeah, those things totally, those things happen to me all the time, way too frequently. Probably today, actually, because I played a bunch of Bullet games. Anyways, in terms of, things to improve from this game, I thought you played pretty well. I mean, you're playing an WFM and you're playing a good game. Yeah, but I would say one of those things, Kiro, is just don't sweat it. If you feel like you're up against a higher rated player, you probably are. If I trust your judgment. Higher rated players often have the advantage of experience and they can hustle wins a little. One of the skills, getting from to 2200 is they can hustle wins pretty well. But yeah, the key thing, the argument that I always say is, just don't give your opponent too much credit. If you give them credit, you're likely to make errors or be bluffed out of best moves. Like, just don't don't sweat it. Would be my advice on strategy there. Masters may consider this to be a less respectful approach, but respect is earned. So don't sweat it if you basically don't overestimate your opponents is my strategy. Masters hang pieces, masters hang pawns, masters make all sorts of very human mistakes, and you can definitely catch them. So don't psych yourself out too hard. Would be my advice on that particular one. Don't be nervous. Just I promise you, if me telling you that I'm a master and I hang stuff all the time, is helpful, I want to make sure that you know that, because it's definitely true. I mean, I think that's not I just think that's a rough direction for you to make, Kiro. Considering that I think you're maybe overestimating the skill of masters now. underestimating would be an overshot. Possible, but maybe an overshot. I can just tell you, they make errors all the time. I think masters get a tremendous amount of mileage out of the fact that people think that they're not making errors when they absolutely are. So that's my recommendation on that topic. It's, you know, everyone makes errors all the time, and I think masters become better at bluffing by not pretending like they're not making errors. But I can tell you, as a master who plays other masters, lower-rated players talk themselves out of many wins because they overestimate their higher-rated opponents. Just experience talking on that one. Anyways, yeah, no, I mean, everyone's human. If you want to watch videos of Magnus Carlsen hanging pieces, I know they exist. I don't think that happens very frequently, but it does happen. But I can tell you, an 1800 versus a 2300, that 2300 makes errors all over the place that 1800 talks themselves out of capitalizing on. I see that. I've seen that happen 100 times in my life, in USCF rated games. So, anyways, that's my take on that one. Anyways, in terms of improving this game, I think you play pretty reasonably. C takes d5, I think, probably helps black a bit. I probably just leave the tension in the center. C takes d5 helps black's dark squared bishop, and you probably don't want to do that. I would just play like knight f3 or standard developing moves, rook c1, bishop e2, bishop d3, and here I think white's pretty good. Yeah, no, I think you should have, Kiro. I think it means you're playing very well. I wouldn't feel bad about it. Like, the master is wins many, master's a strong player. But I don't think losses that come from psyching yourself out are I think you can avoid those. I think that don't talk yourself out of don't talk yourself out of winning. I've seen too many players do that against very highly rated players. Anyways, I would go with standard development instead of c takes d5. C takes d5 seems to help black by opening up an important diagonal. Other things in this game, I think you play pretty well. You get a pretty solid lead. Knight e5 doesn't seem extremely productive. You're trading this knight for that knight, and I think that's sort of it's not a trade that's worth spending a move on. Maybe I also was not a. I mean, I liked the bishop on d3 because it was providing pressure on h7, but yeah, overall here, after knight to e5, it's pretty much equal. I like this. I like the aggressive play in the center. The e3 pawn is backwards, but this isn't an open file, and it will take black a lot of work to make it an open file. So I don't think that this backwards pawn is on a technically open file is as problematic as it sometimes is. So there's that. Yeah, I think basically, yeah, I mean, these types of things for sure. I think masters get a lot of mileage out of being masters. But I think don't talk yourself out of a win against a master. Just remember that they make mistakes, and if you see something that you think is a mistake, it definitely could be. So yeah, so white's better here. White trades off. I think in terms of I think basically knight takes d5 leaves white with a great position. Rook c2, getting the rook to the 7th is probably the correct move here. I think it's an error for black to not play rook to c2. Rook to c2, getting the rook on the 7th is good. Maybe yeah, this all trades off fine. But I think I think if black's asking for a trade of the heavy pieces here, that can only benefit white in a position where white's up a pawn. This is really looking good. This I think should be a win. I mean, I don't, your mindset better than I do, but I would say, I would say don't try not to psych yourself out if you can. I don't know exactly, Kiro, to be completely honest, but I think that you know, it's not worth giving masters too much credit. I think if you believe that they can't make errors, you won't catch their errors when they make them. That's my thinking. You know, not saying that master's not deserved. I mean, you know, master has to play at a very high level on average, but they definitely make errors. You know, you could probably look on USCF cross tables and look at like all the, you know, 1900s that beat 2400s, and you can be like, okay, well, if that happened once, it can definitely happen again. But yeah, like I would go with that exercise. Take like a 2400 on USCF and see how frequently they lose to 1900s. My guess is that it's pretty frequently. You know, I could pick a specific one, but if I you know, and at some point that's less common. You know, probably at 2600 you're not losing to 1800, 1900 too frequently. But your average very active playing like 23, 2400 definitely loses to A players, and maybe B players. So anyways, I wouldn't get too freaked out, and they definitely hang pieces. So anyways, yeah, good luck, Kira. But yeah, here the improvement, I think, really, you know, the decisive. There was that c takes d5 that I wasn't a huge fan of, and there was that trade of knight on e5 that I thought was probably not the best idea, or not worth spending the time on. But the decisive point was this one right here, where you basically hung a pawn in time pressure. King f4 and you're won. So, you know, I would feel generally pretty good about this game. But these things really matter. You know, if you hang this pawn, that really changes the position. King f4 and you're good. So yeah, overall, thank you very much for sending the game, Kira. I really appreciate it. And yeah, on to the next one. This is Houseline's game. Here we go. Houseline is playing white, and the opponent starts off with a very early queen e7. Interesting. d4, d5, h6, and basically I think white's looking pretty good here. You know, this queen e7 doesn't really do a whole lot for black. I am not super familiar with it even. Gundaram defense. Didn't know that was a thing that existed, but I think white plays this pretty reasonably. d4 makes intuitive sense to me. I know it's not the most popular, but I would play things like knight c3, bishop c4, and just kind of calmly develop. You're in a good position. Knight c3, bishop c4, d3. Just basically turn it into an Italian. You know, me being an Italian game player, I say turn it into the Italian game with straightforward development. And basically, you know, you're going to be better off because an issue with moving the queen out this early is it restricts development, particularly of this bishop on e7. You know, black has chosen to move his pieces in such a way that they can't be developed to the most normal squares. So just develop quickly, and when it basically comes around to be the time for black to move the bishop on f8, you will be ahead in development because black will have to spend moves fixing things to move his bishop on f8 to a normal square. You can play knight c3, bishop c4, d3, all that. And basically, yeah, I would say just develop to normal squares here. Knight c3 seems like a good idea. Bishop c4 looks like a good idea. Those are the two most common outcomes. d4 doesn't develop in quite the same way, but it could be, you know, a transpositional move to getting your white, your dark squared bishop out. But yeah, d4 okay, d6. But just keep developing normally, and eventually black's gonna lag because that queen shouldn't be on e7. I don't know what happened exactly here. I just want to follow the game line. The game line, I think, you know, basically, I'm sort of surprised that the engine is talking about moving c4. C4 is a little bit, I mean, I'm sure that this is fine, and white has complete center control here, but I would go with a more development-heavy strategy, given that the queen is making it so that black can't become equally developed. But yeah, just develop bishops, knights, pawns, and basically, I don't know, knight h2, knight g4, things like that, a3, b4. Overall, you're good. And then it looks like black hangs a piece here, and then you're in great shape. So, yeah, nice. Okay, cool. Great tactics at the end. So in terms of looking at this game, where would I play things differently? The engine seems fine with these pawn moves. It's not what I would have done. I would have gone for development over this pawn play. Like particularly here, I would play like maybe bishop e3, maybe knight c3, maybe bishop to b5. But yeah, bishop e3 maybe. But I think white's in a pretty good place. And then you don't. The game doesn't really go on. To be completely honest, the game doesn't really go on long enough to have many other errors. I mean, there's probably some slight inefficiencies in terms of closing this one out, but you're already up a piece. So here I would go with e4, knight f3. But I would go even from here. I wouldn't even play d4. I would play bishop c4, knight c3. But what you did was fine. This is all good. This is just a great victory, to be completely honest. I mean, it didn't go on long enough for any errors to, the competitive part of this game didn't go on long enough for any real errors to occur. So, yeah, but move 15, it's pretty much over. Yeah, maybe pawn takes e5, maybe. Bishop c4, knight at c3. White's got some plans here. Knight c3 probably. Or bishop d3. Just general developing moves. I wouldn't have transposed it all this way, although it is kind of interesting because, yeah, to be honest, it's not like you're making the dark squared bishop on f8 any worse. I think if the bishop's on f8 and is kind of stuck there, you don't really need to lock this all in. I mean, this bishop is very poorly placed at the moment, but it was already sort of poorly placed by queen e7. So I don't know, you're definitely making the bishop worse placed, but yeah. No, overall, house line, it's I want to acknowledge that it's a great win. I mean, basically, I don't see virtually any errors here at all, up until the point that the knight gets hung on move 15. I could nitpick a little bit, but, like, nah, it looks good. Your opponent just erred first. But yeah, I would play, so from a fundamental perspective, this opening is not good because it locks in this bishop. And if you develop, black's not going to be able to match your development. D4 definitely controls the center and definitely challenges the center, and I think that's a positive. So it makes sense. But I would still be inclined to play like knight c3, bishop c4, d3, and just capitalize on the fact that this bishop is going to be very slow to get out of f8. That's my thinking. Knight h4 is sort of not considered to be the most efficient. Knight h4 doesn't directly, attack anything. And it seems, I think, can knight takes d5 be played here? No, I guess knight takes d5, knight takes g6. But knight h4, I think, is not necessarily that great. I think maybe knight to h2. I don't know. I mean, I understand you want to get the bishop involved in this game, but I guess probably maybe queen d2 I would play. Queen d2 prevents black from castling, and it improves this. Basically the only pieces that are left to improve are the queens and the rooks. It improves this queen a little bit. I think I would play queen d2 instead of knight to h4. The engine's got all sorts of ideas, but queen d2 looks fine to me. It looks like it improves the queen, and then you can improve the rooks as well. But overall, these are very small things. Your game makes a lot of sense, and then the piece got hung on on move 15. So good stuff, good win. The only, yeah, the pieces that I think you could make an argument for are development, regular development over d4 here, and then also so regular development over d4 here, and then also you know, queen d2 or some improving move over knight to h4. Knight to h4 becomes kind of stuck on this diagonal, but it also, you know, you don't really have an opportunity to break through g6 here. So I would just play like queen to d2 and solidify pressure on the h6 pawn. That seems more immediately productive than knight to h4. But all was good. It all worked. And then by move 15, your opponent hangs a piece and you have a very decisive victory. Awesome. Cool, good stuff. Yeah, thank you very much for setting that one, Houseline. Very interesting. And yeah, I guess from, you know, I would go with development and have a full understanding of why queen e7 is bad. Like, queen e7 is bad because the bishop is restricted from its most natural developing squares. And the queen's not much better from being on e7, so that's my recommendation there. No, thank you very much for sending that in, Houseline. It was a good game and a good win. And yeah, no, I really appreciate you sending it in, Houseline. Please keep sending in games. Everybody, please keep sending in games, and it's interesting to look at for sure. I mean, it's an idea. You know, Scotch is not bad, but yeah, the issue with this as a standalone move is that it gets the bishop so that the bishop can't play to c5 without you having to make multiple additional moves. That's why queen e7 is bad. Your pieces can't develop to the natural squares. So yeah, so that I think that's one thing to think about. But yeah, thank you very much for sending the game, Houseline. I really appreciate it, and please keep sending them. Interesting stuff to look at. Okay, cool. Here's Ancha's game. Ancha's game is here. Ancha's playing white here. And let's take a look. Okay, cool. So Anch plays a e4 and a larger center opening against his opponent's modern or Knight's Indian or King's Indian defense. I don't know what you would call it. Perk. Modern King's Indian defense and Perk all seem like flank openings with pawns on the 6. I sort of get them confused and they transpose into each other. So, but here, yeah. So here, I think there is an opportunity for an improvement. I think d5 is not really that. I think d5 is too early. You know, basically one of these things with you know, one of the ideas in the modern is basically giving white this big center and big spatial advantage. So center control and spatial advantage, with the hope that you'll be able to undermine that center with moves, you know, with a pawn break. So, you know, when you're playing a big center against a flank opening like this, you need to be very careful about, you know, the value of your moves advancing your pawn to the 5th. You know, black is basically playing for an overextension of a pawn to the 5th rank. That's his goal. Like, literally, that's his plan. So, you know, before you do that, you know, there are definitely places where moving a pawn to the 5th rank against a modern opening is correct. But you really have to be very cautious about it, because you know that that's black's plan, or you know, you can safely assume that that's black's plan, is to undermine your strong center with a break like c5 or e5. In terms of other things, I guess you can do h4. You know, basically, you know, what are you going to do if not d5? You can start playing on the king side, but I think you know, basically your best plan is probably just to develop normally. But I'm just saying as a general point, when you're playing a center opening with e4 and d4 against like d6 and g6, your opponent is hoping for you to play things like d5 or e5 here. That's their literal game strategy, and it happens pretty frequently. I mean, you know, white will overpush, and it will be you know, an opportunity for black. So with that in mind, I think d5 is it's just too early for d5. I'd play like bishop to c4 maybe, bishop to maybe h3 and bishop to e3, but d5 and things that potentially liquidate the center are things to be very, not saying they're always bad, but things to be very careful of generally in games where you're playing a big center against modern perk, King's Indian defense flank setups. So d5 is a I think an overextension by white. Bishop c4 looks good. Bishop to g5 looks good. And I think that's probably the best ideas. Bishop e2 is the most common move for in the opening book. But yeah, neither d5 or e5 is high up on this list. So d5 castles, bishop g5, c6. The book move here is c5. Either way, I think you probably take c6. Let's just make sure. On c5, I think. Well, I guess you don't take c6. Okay. Interesting. But yeah, I think the eval swings too. Just so we're I think after d5 the eval swings by about a point. So now pawn takes c6, knight takes c6, bishop to b5, and I think white's generally okay. I think there was a tactic here, so let's make sure we see what it was. Here knight takes e4. This is going to be a pretty crazy tactic. Knight takes e4, knight takes e4, queen a5. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, that's pretty. Black's getting a lot of pressure on the c3 knight. Yeah, we're into a big tactical position. This is pretty rough. Knight d4, knight d5, and yeah, I think basically white's rolling, but there's a lot of volatility here. Overall, this is a tricky and tactical position. So a4 makes sense. Maybe bishop to d3. Not sure. But this is a very there's a lot of tactics here, so I'd have to go through sort of quickly. A4 makes sense. Defends the bishop. At any point here, black could play bishop takes c3, so defense on the bishop is important. Also, I want to take this back a little bit further. So basically here we're about equal. d5 is not super good for white, but it's fine. It ends up in an equal-ish position. b5 leaves this tactic. With knight takes d4, or knight takes e4, and knight takes e4, the queen can go to a5 and fork the king and the bishop, and knight c3 can't be played because then bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3, queen takes b5. So this is actually a pretty clever sacrifice. This draws away the knight from the defense of the bishop here, and opens a checking line on a5. So overall, this is an opportunity for black. Seeing this tactic is probably pretty tricky. It took me a second, it does. We basically entered tactical play. So the better prepared you are from a tactical perspective, the more likely you are to do this accurately. Bishop d2 seems probably pretty conservative. I think you can just play bishop to e2. I mean, I sort of feel like bishop to b5 was done. Yeah, no, this is one for the tactics button for sure. But I think bishop to b5 was sort of done to develop. Like, just, the bishop should develop because the white king wants to castle, and in general you want to improve your pieces. So I definitely understand the idea of just developing the bishop somewhere. I think the issue with b5 is that it's developed to a square that's tactically complicated. So I would think like bishop to c4 is probably, bishop to c4 I think is probably better than bishop to b5. Bishop to e2 is what the engine is recommending. I think that's a little bit better than bishop to b5. So you're trying to develop. Basically, what I'm saying is you're trying to develop the bishop, but you don't have a. But you develop it to a square, where it creates tactical complexities that aren't necessarily good for you. Bishop b5 makes more sense if there's a king on e8, but here you're just sort of moving it to what is a somewhat arbitrary square. Like bishop takes c6 is not particularly good for white either. So with bishop takes c6, I think that white doesn't benefit from that trade. So you're really just picking a diagonal for the bishop, and with that in mind, I think you probably should go to either c4 or e2, because moving it to b5 creates tactics like knight takes d4 or knight takes e4. Would it be possible to develop the queen and castle queenside? Yeah, interesting question. Thank you for asking it, Ophelia. Maybe. I would lean towards no on that, just because this bishop on g7 seems pretty powerful. Like, I think this bishop on g7 makes it, yeah. No, I understand the question for sure. It makes sense. I mean, you want to start an attack and you want to develop queenside to maximize your king safety while attacking. But I think that the bishop is too powerful to make that to make that work. I think like ideas like rook to c8 and queen to b6 sort of head off that idea, and you basically what where I think this is going to end up is castling queenside improves your king safety by not enough. I think if you move your king, if you castle kingside, your king safety is not extremely strong, and it's not enough different than your king safety if you castle kingside. There's a lot of open lines from black into the white queen side, so I think like between the bishop on g7, the queen on b6, and the rook on c8, there's king safety problems on the queen side. So I would castle kingside here and still attack with like h4, even though like basically like the king castled over here and h4 and potentially even g4 leaves your king less open to attack than castling queenside does. Castling queenside lets the bishop get too dangerous. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no. I mean, and there are Sicilian setups where you can castle queenside for sure. There definitely are, but this bishop on g7 in this particular case I think is pretty strong. Queen b6 is strong, and I think white's taking some risks if he castles queenside. It might be okay, but I'm not sure. Let's take a look. Like queen d2. Bishop to e6, castles queenside. The eval shifts pretty by a lot when you castle queenside, just because king safety issues are going to be an issue. Like see here, like it's minus 0.5 here, and then you castle queenside, and it goes, and then I think the computer identifies queen safety issues with that. I don't see any immediate tactics. Computer saying something about knight b4, but I think that. Yeah, no, I think. I mean, I mean, I'm giving my best first glance guess. I don't want to steer you incorrectly, but I think that black's pieces seem to be facing towards this queen side in a way that they're not facing towards the king side. Yeah, no, for sure. No, thank you very much for asking the question, Ophelia, and please keep asking questions like that. Like, it's super helpful, and I'm always happy to go over the the specifics. But yeah, I think basically king safety is not enough. Is not enough improved queenside to make it the right idea. So bishop b5, I think basically is the wrong diagonal because queen a5 is a threat that is difficult. Yeah, no, it's a really good question though. It's just that particular yeah, I think just in that case, it gives too much tactical vulnerability to black's pieces. Um, Maybe bishop takes e7 here, but things go badly really quickly here. So or things get really volatile on this. Knight d4, I would play knight to d5 maybe. Knight to d5 will threaten the queen and will put a lot of pressure on this e7. So I think knight d5 is the best here, and I think this should be close to a winning tactic. Um, oh, that was what was played. Okay, awesome. Good, great. Yeah, nice. Okay, good, cool, great, great work. Yeah, great work. Good job picking out the correct tactical move. And basically here, white's good. This bishop's hanging. I'm surprised they would call that an inaccuracy. I guess white's bishop on g5 is also hanging. But I don't know. Maybe h4. This is going to be I mean, it's another tactically complicated position. But yeah, this sort of goes well for white very quickly. Basically, this is just a tactically complicated position. It's going to come down to your tactics training. Strategy part of the game is basically over. And in this tactical part of the game, you played accurate tactics and came out, on top. Queen c7 is an error. Queen takes g5 was better, but white is still up. So it's really, I don't know how much I can add to the engine in terms of taking a look at the tactics, but yeah, you played tactically correctly. Got great shot in with knight d5 and knight takes e7, and white gets a solid win here. Oh man, okay. Yeah, this one too is just a sort of one move error, and even rook e1 still saves it. Bummer. Yeah, sorry, Anch. But yeah, I strongly recommend tactics training an hour a day on whatever your preferred method is. It will be really, really helpful. Rook e1, I think, is an improvement here, and I think with tactics training you would see it. So yeah, strongly recommend an hour a day of tactics training. I think it'll be super helpful. Overall, I thought your tactics here are definitely. I think you're definitely showing progress. Like, I think knight to d5 is a good find and best, and basically, knight d5 versus the second best move was a significant difference. And yeah, just keep at it. Chess is chess at class level is very, very tactically oriented. Tactics decide most games. So that's where I would put time in. Rook e1 here, and white should be good to win. Tough loss, because you really were closing in on a win here too. But yeah, tactical study, and it goes your direction. That's my recommendation, Anch. That's where you will see the quickest return on time spent studying. It happens for sure. I mean, look, I would take a look at my bullet games today. If anyone's interested, today I played like probably 20 bullet games, something like that. Maybe more, maybe like 30 bullet games. Take a look at those bullet games. I miss Mate in 1 all the time, as do many titled players. So if you just go to like chess.com, Ted Belanoff, you will see my games where there are many hung Mate in 1s and a lot of tactical stuff like that. If you get the time control fast enough, it gets tricky. But if you're at all interested in seeing kind of how the errors that masters make against each other, take a look at the 1-minute games I was playing today, and you'll see there's a lot of imperfections in those games. Hung Mate in 1s, absolutely. Hung pieces, hung queens. It's a mess. But yeah, take a look if you want to feel, if you want to get a sense of the errors that masters are making, the ones that I'm talking about as in masters make errors all the time. Take a look at the 30 bullet games that I played today and just count how many, you can even do the chess.com analysis or whatever, and see, 6 errors per side in a 1 minute game, one master versus the other. Pretty, I think that'll illustrate my point. Yeah. Yeah. No. I mean, it definitely does happen. It's pretty. It's tough when when the time control gets really fast. Everyone's has to make some compromises on accuracy. All right. We have a few more games. Cool. And we will do them. Okay. Next game is Leif Saez's game. I'll pull that up. Okay, Leif Saez is playing as black. He plays the Petrovs. Cool. Knight takes. And then Stafford Gambit. Okay, cool. Alright, so we went over the Stafford Gambit the other day. Stafford Gambit is a tough gambit to play. This is tough. I wouldn't say if it's fun for you, then sure, feel free to play it. But I think it's just tough to play an opening where you're basically pawn and a half back. I don't know exactly how to best phrase it, but the issue with e5 is fine. Overall, this is just sort of kind of self-inflicted difficulty, right? I mean, basically here, you're on move 4, and you're gonna need to beat your opponent by 1.6 pawns or better for the rest of the game in order to draw. So in order to win, you probably need to beat him by like 2.5 pawns. It's a tough. That's a tall order. Like that's difficult to do. You need to beat your opponent by 2.6 pawns in order to win this game. You might be able to. And definitely, I think if it's fun for you to play this way, then you can, but it's really tricky when you have so much ground to cover. Like normally here in a normal opening, so let's say the mainline Petrovs, you play like d6, and the knight plays to f3, and then you play knight takes e4, and the difference is actually worse in this opening than some, but it looks like it's about 0.7. So when you gambit this full pawn, it's almost an extra pawn down. As black, but it's really hard. You just have so much difficulty. It's going to be so difficult to catch up here. There's just so much to do. Anyways, if it's a fun opening, continue to play it. We can take a look at it. I don't know the traps here super well. I know there are some, yeah, you might as well start aggressively attacking the king side. d4 is a hung pawn. You play bishop takes d4, and now you're in pretty good shape as black. So yeah, I guess overall, this ends up playing out pretty well for, from this position, black is up. And I think you need to be very careful with that bishop. So here I want to just slow down because I think it's helpful to illustrate this concept. Like, how are you going to save the bishop here? This bishop has mobility problems. It can't move here. It can move here, but I don't know if that helps it any. And it can't move here or anywhere else on this diagonal. So here, when you see this bishop locked in like that, you need to come up with some solution for that problem. My proposal actually would be b5. I mean, b5 basically will take this this pawn off of the blocking of this bishop, That makes sense. Rook h5 here is also playable. Hey, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the follow, Pro. Thank you for joining the stream, and thank you for following. So yeah, b5 I guess could work. Rook h5 also could work. But you need to find some way to get this bishop out from being locked like this. This is this is pretty stuck. When you take a rook pawn like this, a tactic that the tactic your opponent often has is to lock the rook or lock the bishop in. It can be dangerous over here. You see it more frequently when there's 3 pawns. So like, let's take maybe we can take a look at earlier in the game. There's a I think you have to look basically at the opponent's ability to lock you in with pawns. Usually it's done with the pawn on c2 and b3, but it's the same basic concept. You've moved your bishop to the edge of the board where it has fewer escape squares, and basically white is doing what he can to make sure that that bishop doesn't get out and that it gets taken by his rook. That's basically what's going on here. So with that in mind, you did see this, I think you saw that the bishop was getting locked in, but bishop b3 does not quite solve that problem. You just have to sort of count out escape squares here. You have this escape square to here, but then white can just play b3. b3 is actually better than rook a3 here. Just b3 is already getting the bishop stuck. But basically, I guess I would say if you have the time in a slow enough game, basically make sure that when you play a move like bishop takes a2 or a similar bishop takes rook pawn type move, make sure that you have enough escape squares. b3 is the most common trap here. That's not possible, but c4 is available for white, and he plays that. And once he plays c4, I'm not sure that the bishop can. I think it's pretty disruptive to black's position for the bishop to get out. b5 is probably the best play here, but bishop to b3, if you count it out, the bishop just doesn't have the ability to escape. Rook a3, bishop there. There's multiple ways where this, there's multiple directions in which the bishop can get stuck. But b5 is actually what's the most helpful tactic here. Bishop b5 threatening to protect this c4 pawn. Anyways, let's keep going. Stafford Gambit's tough to play. I think objectively it gives your opponent a pretty large advantage. But if it's a fun opening, then you can keep playing it. The real error in terms of the decisive error of this game was not paying enough attention to this bishop's escape squares. b5 needs to happen immediately, or what the engine suggests, but this is a pretty engine-like move, is rook h5, rook a5 to defend the rook directly, or defend the bishop directly. But I like b5. b5 makes sense. I mean, you're basically challenging the stuckness of this pawn. Once b5 is played, the c4 pawn can't really be maintained in the same way. You end up probably playing bishop. If the rook moves somewhere, you play like bishop takes c4 and accept the tripled isolated pawns, which aren't good, but still okay. But yeah, really make sure that you have escape squares, because I think that's where this game was decided. I mean, I would, look, with openings, people play objectively not very, myself included, play some objectively not very good openings. I'll show you the line that I like. I have a line in particular that I know is not very good, and yet I still play it, because it's fun for me to play this way. It's bishop c4, bishop c5, c3, queen f6. This is a line that I know is not good for black. I know it well, but I still think this is a fun game to play. So I find myself playing this particular opening more frequently than I should. It gets refuted in a bunch of ways. I mean, b4 is pretty bad for black. d4 is pretty bad for black. But queen f6 is not a good way to play this. But it is a fun game to play. So I'm too, I don't want to be too much like, oh no, it's not good, don't play it. I think you can play an opening that's not that good if you acknowledge that it's that it's objectively not the best idea, and that you're just doing it because that's the fun way to play chess. So I don't think any openings are terrible. Some are just objectively better and worse than others. And the important one is that you find one that has the correct combination of strength and basically you find one that is the most fun for you to play, and that should usually be correlated with the one that's the strongest. I mean, for me at least, it's more fun to win and to play games in which you're ahead or competitive than to play openings that are objectively worse and have worse chances of winning. That said, I still play this opening. I like playing this opening. I know objectively it's not the best, but it gives very fun games to play as black. So I also play some unsound lines, just because that's what makes chess the most fun for me. And at the end of the day, I think that's the biggest priority, is just making chess fun, so you're having a good time with the time that you have to play it. So, anyways, if you like playing the Stafford Gambit, don't by all means stick with it. But it is something that creates a lot of challenges for black. An eval of 1.6 on move 5 is very difficult to go to recover against. You're really going to have to outplay your opponent by a lot to get that to be a win. So yeah, thank you very much for sending it, Leaf Saez, and yeah, I really appreciate it. Next game, I will pull up now. This is a stopped clocks game. Thank you very much for sending it over, and we'll take a look. Okay. Alright, so Stop Clock is playing this as black, and we'll take a look. So here I would say probably c6 is the best, but I'm sure bishop b4 is fine. In terms of commonness, knight f6. Okay. For sure. Okay, yeah, we can go to move 17, and we'll get a good sense. So interesting. I think this is probably good for black. It's sort of a queen's pawn game, but basically one in which the white square bishop for black is stronger than normal. I'm gonna guess this is already pretty solid for black. I mean, this is not far off from equality. English games can be a lot worse for black. c6 I'd probably play, but all of this all makes sense. I assume we're still in theory, yeah. Cool. And here white plays e4. So I think here black has some tactics. E4 is not supported enough, I don't think. I assume that white's going for pawn takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes d2, knight takes d2. But yeah, this is sort of not so great for black. Yeah, I mean, bishop takes c3 is probably the most direct way to win that pawn without giving counterplay. Yeah, I like this. So black is better here. Yep. Bishop takes c3 is the best. I think the engine is saying that d takes e4 is better than bishop takes c3. I think they're about the same. If not, I mean, I would probably look at this position and play bishop takes c3. D takes e4 leads to a much more complicated maneuvering tactic. I don't know. I'm not sure. In a slow game, I'm not sure what I would play. But bishop takes c3 does the job, and knight takes e4, and now you're good. Cool. Rook e8 pins the knight to the king, or basically gives a discovery threat. Castles. And overall here, I think basically black's got a good position. Basically as a result of winning that e4 pawn. Your black's in a good place. I'd probably play things like knight d7, c6, I keep leaning towards c6 just because I know that it's. I feel like in my mind, c6 looks good. It might not be that useful, but I keep wanting to transpose it into a yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for following, Pro, and yeah, thank you very much for stopping by. Yeah, I posted in the I want to teach Reddit. It's basically you know, a Reddit where you can post things that you're teaching for free. Yeah, yeah, I'm happy to see that you made it up, Pro, and thank you very much for joining. But yeah, so knight d7 maybe, a6. Black's looking good. Black's looking surprisingly good, given that he has the 2 knights to the 2 bishops. But he is up a full pawn, so okay. We're around 17. Yes, I like that a lot. Stop clock. I think c5 is probably a good idea. Yeah, if you can get your center solidified, that's definitely going to help. Another potential goal for Black here is to trade off his knight for one of the bishops. If you can trade a knight for a bishop, White's advantage with the minor pieces is going to be a lot less pronounced. b6, c5 makes sense. I get it. In fact, I don't really see what the issue is. I sort of like this. I don't see any... Yeah, this looks fine to me, to be completely honest. I have no problem with this plan. Makes sense to me. Maybe now c4. Maybe. Definitely not c takes d5. Okay, yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's okay. I think your plan was good. I don't, you know, the engine didn't seem to love b6, but I think this plan makes complete intuitive sense. See, b6 and c5 totally cool. Makes sense to me. F5. The issue with f5 is that it doesn't provide much additional protection for the knight. Right. Yeah. No. It is harder to come up with like a purposeful move here. So let's slow down for a second and take a look, because I think you're at exactly the right point. You're exactly the right point in this game to take a look at things. And let's come up with a plan, because this you know, this is a pretty good position for White, or for Black, and I'm pretty sure you can come up with a plan that's gonna win this game here. For sure. I'm thinking maybe. Okay, I'm pretty sure c takes d4 is wrong. Like, I'm pretty sure c takes d4 doesn't really help. I was thinking c takes d4 because if c takes d4, then you get these knights on these posts, which you can't do now. But it does wreck your pawn structure in the middle, so that's not really great. How about g5? G5 is interesting. I like that idea. Yeah. I mean, getting things started on the king side is definitely a valid plan here. The engine is recommending knight to g5, and probably knight to e6 and knight to f4. But I definitely think if you can get a knight to f4, that's going to be progress for Black. Maybe... it's so tricky. Yeah, well, the engine is saying knight g5, but I'm like not super into that. Like, I think knight to g5. Yeah, that's the maneuver. I mean, I'm wondering if there's a better way to do that. Cool. Right. All good thinking, Stop Clock. Yeah, no, I'm at the same position. This is a good position to spend like 20 minutes on over the board. really make sure that you get the best move on this one, for sure. I sort of wonder. I mean, this is probably pretty lame, but knight df6. Yes. Although, no, I mean, I think you have to be a little bit careful about the c5 pawn. But I'm just curious to see if there's a tactical refutation of knight df6. Yeah. Okay, so that runs into this. It's a good idea, but it runs into an issue with f3, because then after f3 the knight has to go somewhere, and then the pawn can play. So like say knight g5 now, pawn takes, bishop takes, I think, and I think this. I don't know. I mean, it's not that great for white, but it does lose that pawn. It's just. Yeah, it's a tough position. I have to really think about this one. I sort of like rook to c8 here. The thing about rook to c8 is it's just a way to, objectively improve a piece. It's sort of a tap out on the larger picture question. But it's yeah, no, for sure. No, I completely agree. And I'm in sort of the same place with you on this one. Coming up with a big strategic plan is something that is probably a good idea to spend a bunch of time on here. Right. Well, I don't think it was bad. I think it just. I mean, black ends up with a good eval after knight df6 too. But I think if you can't formulate a really solid plan. It might be that the best idea might be to just come up with something that objectively improves a piece. I mean, you pretty much know that this rook's mobility on the A file is limited. So, rook c8 is sort of it's sort of an out. You know that the rook should be better on this open file, right, than on the A file. So overall, rook to c8 makes sense, because it's basically going onto this open file. And holding, it's pretty clearly an objective improvement, right? Here the rook has no mobility, and here the rook has plenty of mobility. So, you know for a fact that improves that piece. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it's a piece that you can that you can improve. So if you're looking for a move that does that is objectively one. Then maybe white will give you something more to make a plan out of. But improving your pieces when none of your pieces is vulnerable is probably always going to be okay. So yeah, so I guess I would lean towards rook to c8. F5 is interesting, and there definitely are plans that could be assembled around attacking the king on the king side here. But the issue with f5 is that it opens too many lines on your king. It's something that does do an advance on the king, so it can definitely be part of that plan. But I think that it needs to come after things like either, I don't know, some mess of moves here, like queen h4, knight g5, and then eventually you can play like f5, knight gf6, and black will be in a good shape. That's my opinion on this. It's just here. It's too early and it's too compromising. It's tough though, because it's a really tough idea. It's a really tough place to come up with a full plan. Knight g5 is like a really really computer assisted plan. Basically the computer's saying knight g5, knight e6, knight f4. It's very this is a very complete and unhuman plan. Maybe knight g5, knight e6, and then knight to d4 could be good. Like maybe you can get that knight outposted there and control a lot of squares and put white under a lot of pressure. But overall, this is a tough position. Rook c8 makes sense, as does knight g5, knight e6 as plans. Tough position, though. Knight g5, knight e6. I like. Cool. But yeah, this definitely sort of basically that open file that provided that really became a problem for white there, or for black there. Maybe knight f5, knight to c4 here. So yeah, so here's a place. So you know, the answer is you looked at the right position. It was a super complicated position. Two plans include rook c8 and knight g5, knight e6. But difficult and worthy of more time than I can safely give it. Really interesting position. Good job identifying where a really key part of this game is. Here I think there's a more yeah. So here I think you do have some slightly more simple improvements here. Knight e5 I think is really good. So rook e3, and the move is knight to e5. You want to get your pieces, you want to get your knights posted in the center. Like, you know, getting this knight to d4 is really good. The issue with knight to e5 is bishop takes c5, but you can play rook takes f3 and be fine. Yeah, no, for sure. And you are trading pawns basically. But this, yeah, you know, sacrificing this c5 pawn for this f3 pawn is fine. Bishop takes, rook takes, king goes g2 probably, and then knight to e5, and then now you've really got a lot of pressure on the king. So I understand not wanting to give that pawn up, but the end position is these knights are posted now, and that's super helpful for you. So now you have like ideas like rook g3, knight takes g4, and basically you're gonna get a lot of play on the white king side. So yeah, so knight to e5 was an improvement there. Trading off the I see that this bishop fork is pretty rough because the bishop is forking both the rook and the knight here, but you can actually get both of the pieces out. You know, bishop takes. So here, knight e5, bishop takes, rook takes, king somewhere, and then knight somewhere. Knight probably to e4, I think is the best idea. So that's my recommendation on this topic. Yeah, this mainly comes down to a tactical improvement. In terms of other ideas, I think maybe knight to c4 could be good. Knight to c4 trades this bishop off for the knight and doesn't have that problem with the hanging pawn. So I like this move too. The g5 pawn is not extremely important to you. This pawn is not really under attack, and giving your basically trading off your doubled pawns so your opponent can have doubled pawns is probably good for black here. I mean, basically, it's not that bad to trade off your g pawn for you're trading your double g pawns so your opponent can get double g pawns. What about rook a e8? Yeah, I think that's fine. Yep, no problems there. I think, yeah, rook a e8 makes sense. You can play, you're threatening rook to e2. Bishop a4 causes some problems, though. But you're still fine. Rook e2, king g1. Maybe. Tough. It's a good question, Aphelion, for sure. I would play like knight. I mean, I would play knight to c4. And the reason why is just it's pretty simple. It's just you're trading off a knight, so you're disrupting your opponent's bishop pair. Here you basically trade off your knight for that bishop, and you're good. Yeah, a lot of moves are okay here for black. I agree. Yeah, rook e2 is fine. Knight f7 is not great, but is fine. But I would, now you have an opportunity to do either one of two things. You can either trade off the knight for a bishop, which is going to be helpful to you because your opponent won't have the bishop pair anymore, or you can trade, or you can try to improve your knights. And that's what the engine is recommending. The engine is with its maneuvering is basically coming up with move your knights to outposts. Knight c5, bishop takes c5, rook takes, and then knight to e4. And both of your knights are outposted on e4 and e5, and basically doing just fine against the bishops. The bishops are not really much more helpful than the knights in that situation. But for the most intuitive move, you could just play like knight c4 or knight b4, and the bishop is gonna get traded for this knight, and you're good. So yeah, so I like that. Knight c4, knight b5, and trade a knight for a bishop. Yeah, I mean, it's simplifying. But I think that's what I would do. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, here I think black's in pretty good shape, actually. Yeah, black ended up winning. Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, great. I mean, this worked. A good job maneuvering with that rook pawn. Yeah, good game. Good draw before the rook trade. Sure. Yeah. I mean, maybe. Yeah, probably. But I actually really like the way that you played this endgame. Yeah, this makes sense. Maybe winning this as black is sort of tricky, right? Because I mean, I guess this f3 pawn is pinned, or it's basically difficult to defend. The bishop will have to come here, and then it'll be a liability because your knight is already attacking it. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, no, good win of the A pawn. The computer sees it way ahead of time. Like the computer sees the win of the A pawn as of like here. But yeah, no. I think that's interesting. Let's see, just in terms of improving this game, because I want to make sure that I do yeah, good job with this. I want to be able to summarize this pretty clearly. I thought that black basically gets this free pawn, which is really helpful. And then here there's kind of a difficult, it's kind of difficult to know how black should proceed. The ideas that we came up with were rook c8, which straightforwardly improves the rook, or the more complicated plan, knight g5, knight e6, and then either knight f4 or knight d4, which improves the knight. This bishop is kind of stuck over here, and it could become a target for you to trade a knight for. Here I would play knight to c4, maybe knight to c4 or knight to b5, but something that threatens that bishop. I would trade off the knight for a bishop. And yeah, and then once this happens, Well, and then after knight f7, I think you've lost some opportunity to trade for the bishop. But I prefer, yeah, I think an improvement here, straightforward improvement, is just knight c4 and trade off your knight for that bishop on a3, and you're pretty good. Yeah, I mean it probably was. Yep, good work. Cool. Cool, cool. Yeah, thank you very much for sending that, Stop Clock. It's really a good game, and yeah, I hope that's helpful. The pieces where I think the biggest improvements were here coming up with. I thought b6, c5 made sense as a plan. F5 exposed black to too many attacks and wasn't really necessary to defend this e4 knight. And then in the later game, this knight to c4, knight to b5 move is pretty good for black. I think that's good. I think that's a good way to play. And the engine is suggesting knight to e5. That's pretty ambitious, but you can just go with the straightforward trade off the knight for the bishop pair. I generally agree with that, Stop Clock. I mean, I'm happy to go over, whatever. But, the thing about the calculation tactical ones is I don't really feel like I can add as much value in terms of teaching. Like, I'll end up basically reading the engine output of, like, what's better. So, yeah, this is a really good general idea. This was a really good game to send. We had that position where it was really tough to come up with a plan, and I think we came up with two pretty good general ideas and ways to approach it. Basically, the thing about that position where you were looking for a plan is you did definitely have one objective way to improve the position. Like, you could very objectively improve the rook. So the rook to c8 made a lot of sense. And then, knight to basically here. I think this is just, this is sort of an endgame priorities thing. Like, basically, trading off the knight here for a bishop is a good thing to do if your opponent has a bishop pair versus a knight pair for you. That makes sense. But yeah, overall, very interesting. Thank you very much for sending the game, Stop Clock, and I hope this is helpful. Thank you very much for sending it. Please keep sending games. I'm super happy to look at anything, really, including the tactical ones. But I don't feel like I can add as much original value there. So yeah, thanks Stop Clock. Thank you very much for coming in. I hope that's helpful. Awesome. Okay. So next game. What was the one? There was another one. I thought that we got two new ones. I think I got them all. If anyone, Race to the Prizes game, I think, is next. Cool. Okay. And I think Race to the Prize is black here, right? Or black or white? Okay, you're black. Okay, cool. Awesome. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. How about this one? Oh, it's Porgs, right. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Just because I took those ones. Would you be cool sending yours in again, Race for the Prize? Unless this is it. Is this it? Or no, this is Porgs' game, and then this one... Okay. Yes, we could very quickly go over the Felion variation too, for sure. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing the Felion variation a lot. This is your one. Okay, cool. Thanks, Race. Yeah, Porgs. We'll get well, wait. I just want to make sure. No. We can go through it. I want to go. I think Porg sent. Is it all right if we go over Porgs' first? I think Porg sends his in first. So I want to make sure that I want to try to go in order, honestly. And we've only got two left, so Yeah. So here, Porgs is playing black, and um, okay, d5. So this is interesting. Bishop c4, f5. I don't know this one super well either. A very interesting gambit. Looks super aggressive. Okay, you're white. All right. So your opponent plays this. Your opponent plays this aggressive gambit. I don't know it super well. It's probably somewhat similar to the Latvian. But yeah. I think you can just beat this, can't you? I feel like, doesn't bishop takes g8? Is there like a serious... Unless I'm like totally wrong about this. I thought you could play like queen h5 here. No, okay, I guess not. So queen h5 is the trap that that black is setting here. You know, basically black is hoping for bishop takes g8, queen h5, and then queen takes h7 and a worse position. So here, rook takes, queen h5, g6, queen takes, and this after rook g7 is actually better for black. It's a tricky game, tricky thing to do, and tough. Yeah, tough play. Pawn takes is good. Knight f3 is also good. Cool. Here, queen h5 looks really good. So I would say, so the first thing is, you know, one of the things about these games, Porgs, is if you get your tactics good enough and get to a high enough rating level, you see these openings a lot less frequently. So you don't, you know, for me, it's actually great practice because I haven't seen these types of openings in a very long time. And it's great, but it's great. So like, you know, I don't know if anyone's, and I sometimes play the bishop's opening. I've not seen this game in a long time. So pawn takes, and then what you can't do here is the immediate bishop takes, queen h5, g6, queen takes, rook takes. This is actually better for black. Worth knowing, not something that I would know off the top of my head. Okay, so here, pawn takes f5, d5. And now you're going to have a lot of threats with queen h5. So I would, here's your opportunity. If you basically see this formation where the knight is not developed, and you can move your queen out and there's a pawn on f5, this is almost always going to be good for you as white. So I'll show you what happens. It's actually kind of cool. So if g6 here, pawn takes g6, and then best move is bishop g7, but if knight f6 here, what you play is g7, knight takes, pawn takes h8, and queen, and basically white is definitely much better here. Engine is talking about bishop b5, but all right, whatever. Queen takes h8, and you get a new queen, and then you have a big material lead because you got the rook and all the pawns. So pawn takes, d5, and the move is queen to h5. You have to be careful with these types of moves, but if you have a pawn on f5 and the knight is not able to take your queen, you're in good shape. This discovery, so the answer here is not queen takes e5, although that's also fine for white. It's actually this g7 move, which gets you a new queen, sacrifices the queen and gets the rook. So pawn takes, d5, queen h5 here. Your ideas are either king e7, or basically black has a number of ideas here. King e7, king d7, or g6. King e7 is the best. On king e7, I guess you play queen to h4, but it's sort of tricky. I don't know, d4 maybe? But white is pretty solid here. This is good for white. Yeah, interesting. Cool. Yeah, so very interesting game, Porgs. I want to make sure that I give it. I really want to take a look at this. Um, d5 runs into bishop b3, and here, but here basically queen to h5 is an improvement. You know, it's sort of hard to calculate through all of it, but g6, pawn takes g6, and g7, and then white's good, I think. I like this. Here, okay, this is sort of interesting. You've given back the e-pawn, so I guess black is probably a little bit better. Black has a good center control. This knight is valuable, and overall, black is looking good. Queen to d7, and I don't know, rook to a1. Yes, yes. Thank you very much for asking, you. Take a look at the stream from take a look at this morning's stream. This morning's stream is the one with the Vienna Gambit. It was this morning, so you should be able to find it on the Twitch channel. It's like the last one before this. But I went over the Vienna Gambit, basically e4, e5, and then knight c3 against both knight c6 and knight f6. Why is knight c3 bad? I think it's just basically it has to do with d4 being playable here. I assume. No, e4 being playable. Okay, so it's e4. The issue is you need to come up with a move that stops e4. Because on knight c3... Yeah, no, thank you very much for asking, you, and yeah, I hope it's helpful. We went over both knight c3 against knight f6 and knight c6, and we sort of talked about why those two are different. Yeah, so e4 is the issue. You know, moves that stop e4 are okay. Yeah, sure. Let's just play through it. So here e4, and then queen e2 runs into bishop e7, I guess. Yeah, bishop e7. Because, you know, basically, it's a really good question. No, I really want to explain these porks because I think it's hopefully super helpful. It's definitely super helpful in terms of me learning exactly what's going on. But yeah, so bishop e7 blocks the threat on the king, and then the attack on knight f3 is still there. The knight has to play to g1, and then you're good. So that was basically the improvement there. You know, e4 sort of must be stopped, and then queen e2 you know, doesn't queen e2 doesn't stop it, basically. Here there's pressure on the king, and I think basically white is good. Or sorry, black is good. Black's forcing the knight off of that f3 square. But yeah, here I think the real big improvement is queen to h5, and I showed how it works. Queen to h5, king here or king d7 are fine, but you can do stuff like play to bishop e2 or play like bishop to g4 or something like that. G6 instead, pawn takes, knight f6, g7, knight takes, pawn takes, and basically white is in a good place here. Okay. So, what are the improvements? Knight c3 allows e4. So, something like d3 does not allow e4. Knight c3 and e4 is more tricky. Maybe f3 here. Overall, white has a good position. White's putting a lot of pressure on the e5 pawn. That's good. And here I think what I would do is I would take knight takes e5. So this is a situation where you have a good opportunity to set up a pin on the king. And you were talking about the pin on the king, and I think that here you can really do that effectively. So knight takes e5, knight takes e5, d4, and this knight is pinned, and you're going to get it back. So this this takes, pawn takes, d4. Now you're good on this king. So that was the idea there. So yeah, knight takes I think is good. Knight takes d5 is also playable here. Knight takes d5. That pawn appears to be hanging. And overall, I think you're playing in a fundamentally correct way. Like I like this game basically. I think you're doing something where I would say your game is so if I were you, what I would do is I would really do a lot of tactics. I think what you're doing makes a lot of sense, Porgs. Welcome back, FIFA boy. Thank you very much for joining the stream. Good to see you back. But yeah, Porgs, I like it, and I think basically you're playing a good you're playing a good game from a fundamental perspective. You're developing your pieces. You used your rook to move on to the semi-open file. You played d4 and pawn takes d4, and you're getting good development for your pieces. So from a fundamental perspective, I think this all makes sense and is good. What I would do in terms of improving Porgs is I would make sure that you can really, that you can really like execute well tactically. The moves that you need to sort of see, because they come up a lot. So I like what you're fundamentally doing. I think you're developing correctly, moving the rook to e1, seizing the open file. These all make sense from a positional perspective. The moves that you need to see are the ones that take you out of the fundamentals, and you need to have good pattern recognition in order to correctly execute there. On d5, with enough tactical training, you will see that queen h5 is white's best move. So there I would say your fundamentals are right, and what you need to do is you need to play, you need to have very good pattern recognition. There what I would do is I would play an hour or two of tactics trainer a day, like Puzzle Battle or Puzzle Rush on chess.com, or Chess Tempo is free, or I think Lee Chess also has a free tactics trainer. I think this will make the quickest, I think this will help you improve the most quickly. The fundamentals are right, and actually, and it's interesting in this game because I think that that what you're doing really does make sense. You're developing your pieces good, you're developing your rook good, and seizing, getting good mobility for your rook. I think this all actually really makes sense and is correct opening play. But what you need is the thing that takes you out of the takes you out of the defined main lines, or doing something that deviates from the fundamentals. And I think you're going to be most confident doing that when you have good tactical training behind you. So apart from the fact that overall I think it's really going to help. It helps everybody under 2000 really to spend a lot of time on tactics training. But I think it'll particularly help you here because it'll know, when to do what the fundamentals are saying, which is what you do, and when to deviate from the fundamentals because there's a tactical win there. It makes sense. What you're doing makes sense, and it's good from a fundamental perspective. But Queen H5 is not a fundamental move; it's a tactical move. And it would win, and it would put you close to winning this game. So I like this this fundamental play. Makes sense. You win a piece, awesome. And all of this seems to be going well for you. Yeah, I think it's partially checks, Porgs, and I think it's partially yeah. So I think it's partially checks, and I think it's also partially just pattern recognition. I'm happy to help you, like send a tactics trainer or whatever. If you do a lot of tactics training, it's really, really going to help. I think, I hope, I don't know where FIFA Boy is and how this fits into his studies, but I think it can really help your understanding of the position. But the fundamentals are right. You developed all your pieces. You moved your rook to the open file. That all made sense. And then you had some good tactical execution later in this game too. But I really think you'll see very good returns on the time that you spend studying if you do tactics training, either on like on whatever tactics trainer you have access to. It doesn't really matter. It's just if you put in the time, it'll help you improve. That's my opinion on that. So Queen H5 I like. Pawn takes E5 was good, puts you way ahead. Good stuff, you're up a piece. And then here, you hang the queen. So this is an error, and we all make errors. We all make lots of errors. I wouldn't. Honestly, I make more errors in a day than most people. I make many errors. But yeah. So here, bishop to G4 hangs the queen, and basically loses the rook. So I think identifying this type of attack is important. This game is going very well for you, but then you move the bishop and hang the queen. That is okay. We all make errors like that for sure. But I think that tactics training will really help you make fewer of those. Tactics training like Puzzle Battle, Puzzle Rush, I think are particularly good for this. Like the first five, if you do a puzzle battle, the first 5 puzzles, like in the Puzzle Battle program, are going to be things that are pretty similar to this. They may be played from the other side, like it may be that you're playing black and then your opponent does this, but you'll get very good recognition of when pieces are hanging versus not hanging. It'll make you careful, and you'll see all the one-move tactics much quicker and more cleanly. In terms of playing this game, like it's, I think you understand the development and you understand the fundamental concepts. Black's knight and bishop were more powerful than your rook. Yeah, so here I think, interesting. Yeah, well, I like this tactic. I like the idea of bishop to G5. In terms of, yeah, you're in an interesting situation. There's complicated tactics here. So you lose the rook, but you do have this tactic. But here, basically, the issue is if he plays bishop takes e2, you play rook takes e2, and you don't get enough from that thing. I like the tactic where he plays a6, and then you play bishop takes f6, pawn takes f6, rook takes h5. This here by itself. So if the game started right here, or if this was a puzzle on Puzzle Battle, you actually have a very good tactic here. It's bishop takes f6. With bishop takes f6, you basically remove the defense of this bishop on h5, and are good. So pawn takes, rook takes. You're in good shape. So yeah. What were the big improvements here? Queen h5 I think was the first one. And pawn takes h8, cool. We showed you how to do that tactic. And then d4, okay, pawn takes d4, knight takes, rook takes, cool. But yeah, the issue is just that in a longer game, it's going to be difficult for bishop b4 is gonna be is gonna lose you too many games. You know, that type of move where there's a 9-point swing is just gonna be too difficult to recover from. Queen F1 probably is the right way to do this, but I think you just can't in general allow tactics like that. So tactics training, I think, is where you know, where you will gain points. So I don't know you know what tactics trainer you use specifically, but Puzzle Battle, Puzzle Rush, I think is the best play for you, Porgs, and I think that will leave you in a pretty good position. So you know, I would just put in as much time as you can. I hope it's fun. Tactics, I think tactics training is really fun, but it's up to you to do it. And basically, in order to improve at the level that you're at, I think tactics training is by far the most efficient way to do it. So thank you very much for sending in the game. Let's go on to the next one. Next game is yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think Puzzle Rush is probably a yeah, Puzzle Rush is good. I mean, you know, I don't know a good policy for it. I mean, it's basically it's tough when you only have one per day. I feel a little lucky. I have the free premium, so I can do as many per day as I can do as many per day. But what I would say is probably play yeah, Puzzle Rush is a good one, but something like that. Here, I have chesstempo.com. I know that that's free. If you do a bunch of the ones from here, yeah, Chess Tempo is good. That's what I would suggest, Porgs. I think that'll probably help you. But you want to do like, and you know, you want to do as much of those as you can. I think if you do those and you do those, you know, consistently, it'll really help. So, on to the next one. This is a game that Race to the Prize sent in as black. All right, Bishop C4, Knight F6, and Aphelion I think would play. I think Aphelion would play Knight G5 here, and responded to with Bishop to C5. Okay. Yeah. But this two knights response to the Italian game. Okay, sort of an Evans Gambit looking thing. Probably bishop takes is safest, and here I think you're pretty much. I think basically, you know, here you're fine. On rook e1 you play d5, I think. No, sorry, you can't play rook e1. So yeah, so you're never really in any danger here. Black just gets way ahead. Bishop takes b4 is good. Knight takes e4 is good because bishop takes e1. And I think basically black is in pretty good shape until he hangs the queen. Queen takes c6, right? Yeah, black's just winning. All right, cool. Good work. E4, bishop c4, bishop takes b4. Yeah, if you get to, I know you like that opening, Aphelion, so. But yeah, so knight takes d4 is probably the best play here. Rook e1, bishop takes, queen takes. And here I think basically, you know, black is good. Maybe castles, f6. I don't know, bishop d7. Nothing's really immediately attacking the knight on e4. So maybe bishop g4, knight d2, f5. On pawn takes, I think you can play queen to g5 here. And king f1 or king h1, then queen takes d2. But yeah, overall pretty good for black. I don't know. Missed win, computer missed win on move 13. Well, you're already winning, so I think you're in pretty good shape on here. D5, bishop G4. Basically, I think just the issue is knight to D5. I don't really think it's an issue with you, you know, with a win. I think it's just maintaining a win. Here, I think you have a win, right? This is, you know, this is a good position for black. I think you play queen f6, you play like bishop to g4 maybe, but black is fine. You know, the issue is that that bishop to g4. So it's not that you missed a win; it's that you have a win, and then your opponent has a strong tactic. So here, queen f6 maybe, bishop e6, and then knight e5, I guess. But yeah, knight to d6, I guess, is sort of forced. Knight takes, bishop takes, knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes a8, queen takes a8, and black I think is better here. No issues. So yeah, so it's not that you missed a win. It's that you have a win here, and bishop to g4 generates complicated tactics. If you play something conservative here, like bishop e6 or yeah, probably bishop e6, and then maybe knight d6 and castles, something that gets you out of trouble here. Queen d7, I don't know, whatever. Black's going to be in good shape. F6 is an idea, f5 is an idea, king f7 maybe, but f6, king f7 seems to work fine. Bishop e6 also seems to work fine. You need something that's less aggressive. A6 maybe, b6, pawn takes c6. They'll probably try to put some pressure on the e4 square, but overall here I think black's probably pretty good. This should be fine. Even if you have to lose the pawn, it's fine. Pawn here, pawn here, pawn here. Queen takes, queen d5. Overall here, black is just better. No issues, no problems, and nothing big. So where would I suggest that you improve here? I think bishop takes b4. I think everything's going well for you here. I don't see any errors for black. Really, the first... And d5 looks fine to me, too. d5, I guess maybe this creates some issues with this pin. Right, yeah, exactly. No, that's correct, Aphelion. That's right. Here, I think... yeah, no, completely right, Aphelion. So here I would play queen e7 probably. You know, reducing the problems that come with this pin is a good idea for black. So queen e7 and then knight f6 next move solves a lot of problems for black. If bishop b5, bishop d7, I think pretty much black is fine. Bishop d7, knight f6, no real issues. So black's in great position here. Queen e7, d5 makes sense to me, but it has two problems. First, it doesn't stop this pin. This pin is gonna, you know, basically this pin is something that often happens in the Panov, where there's an issue with pins on e4 and you know, f3 with queen e1 getting held. Right. And the other issue here is this bishop controls that diagonal. So basically, with that diagonal controlled, and not really much of a way to fix it, and now no ability to play queen e7 because queen e7 is on that diagonal, the king's going to have like castle queen side, probably. So overall here, I think, you know, ideas like f5 are probably the best. Bishop e6 is probably good. But here, basically, I think black's pretty strong going into... I mean, black manages his difficulties here. This is Yeah, no, for sure. That bishop is on a really powerful diagonal, and with d5 you make that. So the question is, you need to defend the knight here, either with e7 or d5 or bishop f5. But the issue with d5 creates that problem where you can't castle anymore. So that's not so for that reason. I think the biggest improvement for black basically all game. I think basically black played a pretty good game. Um, uh, d5. I think bishop takes good, and then d5 is an issue. You play queen e7 instead, and then yeah, I've made that mistake before. I remember playing. I remember actually trying to castle through check in a game once when I was about 12 or 1300. It happens. Happens, a couple times. But yeah, queen e7 is the best idea here. Queen e7 is the way to defend this knight. Bishop f5 also runs into problems with like knight h4 and then knight h4 f3. F3 executes on this pin here. Queen e7 is the way to go. White doesn't really have a great response to this. Bishop f5 maybe, but queen e7 I think is the solution. d5 pins the knight, but isn't really that great. So castle's queenside, pawn takes. This is fine for black. This ended up playing out fine for black. You untangled it without losing the piece, and were able to castle queenside at the right time. So, good stuff. Here, queen c6 is effective, I think. On queen f5, you play queen e6, or maybe you don't even have to. Maybe just play king b8. But overall here, I think basically black is good. No real issues. Queen e7 holding the d6 was the error. Queen e7 and you're fine. Black hung in exchange. You have a little bit of material to give back, but I wouldn't give up material if you don't have to. Queen e7 holds everything together, breaks the pin, and you're basically good. Queen e7 is the idea, and then knight f6. But yeah, thanks very much for sending the game, Race. I think you overall had a really good position. You basically held a lead almost the entire game, and the main improvement was in queen e7 over d6. Queen e7 over d6, and you're in a good place. So yeah, thank you very much for sending it, Race. Thanks very much for that. Really appreciate it. And thanks for the thanks for sending the game. Interesting, and I hope that was helpful. Thank you all very much for being here. Next stream is tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern time. I'll put up new schedules, I think, tonight on one of the Discords, because I think I haven't put in the 10th one yet. But all, please keep sending your games, and please, I really appreciate the participation and stuff. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for asking the question. All right, we'll go over the Felion variation. I really want to see it. Awesome. The Aphelion variation, which I don't know yet, but we'll be playing every single time that we... No, for sure. I want to go over it. I forgot about it, but I want to go over it. Here we go. The Aphelion variation, which will be brought up every time that Aphelion sends a game, or every time Aphelion sends a game, we'll look at the Aphelion variation. And then it'll either catch on or it won't, but it will catch on in this stream at the very least. So, e4, e5, bishop c4, knight f6. Okay. Bishop c5, we're in the Traxler. This is the Traxler for anyone who's familiar with this position. Knight takes h8, d6, c3. Okay. All right, that is the Aphelion variation. For anyone watching, this is the Traxler. Knight takes h8, and what makes the Aphelion variation is first d6, second c3. Okay, now we know that's the Aphelion variation. We'll see it a bunch. c3 is the signature move, and everything will be good. But yeah, thanks very much, Aphelion. Thank you for sending it. Thank you for being here. And yeah, on to the next one. I'll be back at 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. I'll post the schedule for tomorrow tonight. And yeah, please all keep sending games. It's great to have material to work with. Thanks, guys. No, thanks, and yeah, everybody have a good night. I'll be back at 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. Thanks a lot, guys. See you later. Thanks. Bye.